No one had to tell you who God was, who Creator was. You knew. Ever since you were a young one, you knew. No one had to tell you. No one had to explain to you who your maker was. You knew. As did I. Hey there, powerful soul. I'm Cassandra, and we are going to have a very potent conversation around trusting yourself in a world where systemic programming has made gaslighting a cultural norm, and why now more than ever, the leaders, God's women leaders of faith, leaders across industries, leaders across organizations, leaders across the world are being called more now than ever to rise, and to rise in your faith, to rise in your power, to rise in your divine authority, and to rise in the trust of that inner knowing and that small, not even small, it's a grand voice, the voice of I am that I am, that has been speaking to you since you have been a young one. And throughout all the different human experiences you have had on this planet, you have been conditioned, you have been programmed, you have been taught, you have been indoctrinated, you have been educated, you have been trained to ignore that voice, to suppress that voice, to numb that voice. And the time to stop doing that is now, because the world needs you now more than ever. The world needs your leadership. The world needs your trust. The world needs what you have to say. The world needs your unique perspective and insight. The world needs the way that you are going to reconstruct industries and systems and organizations that have been built off of lies and have been built off of programming and have been built for the better good of some and not for others. And God is calling you right now to step it up, me included. And that's why I'm here, because we're going to talk about it. We're going to have a conversation about it. There is a conversation that has been brewing in my spirit around trust. And when you are a leader in your family, a leader in your home, a leader in the work that you do, there is a different level of responsibility we carry with the anointing and the mandate we have from our Maker. We don't get to operate business as usual. We don't get to operate as status quo. We don't get to march to the beat of other people's drum. We do not get to do that. We have supernatural instructions. I call this inside of my work divine directions, guidance from God that we are to follow. And the scriptures inside of the Bible and many other wisdom traditions and religious faiths, I study multiple faiths, and so I am not married to one specific religion, all have a common thread around being in the world, but not of the world. And when you are in these systems, and when you are in these industries, and when you are in these organizations, and when you are in these companies, and when you are in your own business in the industry, it doesn't take much. I wrote a post about this recently where I said it's the 1% misstep that becomes the 100% misalignment for the 1% woman. You cannot afford that 1% misstep, because the level of integrity, the level of alignment, the level of embodiment, the level of integration that you have to walk by is quite different than most. It's not about fair. It's about the favor that comes, the supernatural favor that comes as a result of you yielding to that divine voice from Creator within. So I want to make a disclaimer before I go deeper into this. If you are listening to this live or on the replay, to the sound of my voice, you are agreeing to listen to what I share for your own personal growth journey. What I share is not to be replicated, duplicated, copied, extracted, or taken. As a African indigenous Black woman of color, that is a very real experience that I have had inside of multiple industries I've worked in, specifically inside of the online coaching industry and the personal growth and development industry, inside of the spiritual coaching industry. I have experienced that. I'll share more about that here in a moment. But I want to make a disclaimer that I don't care what race you are. I don't care what gender you are. I don't care what the color of your skin is. If you are listening to this conversation, you are agreeing to be here as a participant. You are taking your ego hat off to be a student, and you are here to learn. You are here to listen. You are here to do your own work. This is not so you can extract. This is not so you can take. This is not so you can replicate and duplicate and reverse engineer what I'm saying and then go out there and try to make it your own. Not in my space. I won't tolerate it and I won't allow it. Now that I've set the standard, let's continue. One moment as I take a sip of tea. It is storming outside. And I don't know if you have been able to see that. If you have noticed that it has been storming outside. When I was a little girl, when it was storming outside, my late Granny Medea would set my little 3 or 4-year-old self down, and it was just she and I in her living room with the plastic covered furniture. My Black folks know what I'm talking about. And she would tell me to be quiet. She'd turn all the lights off and we would sit in the dark. And she started to train me as a little girl how to discern and listen to the voice of our Creator. She would say, be quiet. God is speaking. Now, while it may not be storming literally wherever you're at, it is storming metaphorically all over this nation and all over the world. And now more than ever, as leaders, it is time to listen. Now, as a leader, as a woman leader of faith, you should have been listening, but I'm not here to shame folks, okay? I'm here to remind you. I'm here to activate you. I'm here to ignite you back into the knowing of who you are and what you came to this planet for. You did not come here for status quo. You did not come here to acquiesce your divine authority and power. You did not come here to play patty cake with folks that are playing power games on this planet. You came here for something different. I'm here to remind you of that. And this is a time now more than ever where you have to have a level of bodily somatic awareness around that listening. Because many indoctrinations have conditioned people to only read books and to have a cognitive understanding of God and have disconnected them from a neck down. And part of my work as a somatic identity architect and a prophetess is to bring you back into your body temple, to have a visceral, somatic experience of God in your body and return you to that inner knowing where you trust that voice within the body temple. And right now, more than ever, you can't afford to not trust that voice. However, we live in a world where gaslighting has become a cultural norm inside of family systems, inside of various industries, inside of various cultures, inside of all sorts of people groups and organizations. Gaslighting has become a cultural norm where it's become so normalized. People do it and don't even know they're doing it. People lie and don't even realize they're lying. People are gaslighting themselves and don't even realize they're gaslighting themselves, because it has become a cultural programming that has become so normalized that you have been indoctrinated into this mental paradigm since you were a young one. When was the first time someone told you to be quiet? To not say that, to not speak truth? When was the first time that you experienced a sexual violation and someone told you to sweep it under the rug and to not say anything? When was the first time you witnessed as a little girl something that you knew in your spirit was not right, and you said something and you were gaslit and you were told to be quiet, or you were denied the reality that you knew that you saw? This programming begins usually before you're even school-aged or during school age, in your home, in the school system, in the education system, in multiple industries. And you are navigating your experiences throughout life in your home, in the school system, and the education institutions that you went to, into the workplaces that you worked in, and the industries that you worked in, that gaslighting was normal. It's not. When the scripture says be in the world, not of the world, that is of the world. That is of the world. The world gaslights and normalizes it. The world says it's normal to deny the truth of reality. The world says it's normal to put a veil over your eyes and to only see through a false perception. The world says it's normal to put a filter over your ears and to hear through the filter of distortion. The world normalizes lies. The world normalizes counterfeit. The world normalizes dysfunction. There is a reason for that. Because when you have been so conditioned to normalize it, you can be controlled. And when you can be controlled, my dear, oh, can they strip you of your power and your voice and your divine authority and of your faith and of the message that God wants to speak through you, Ruach Elohim. Your voice gets trapped when you are living of the world, the ways of the world. Hey there, powerful soul. Thank you for your presence. I'm so grateful for you being here. I have very distinct memories as a little girl being brainwashed and conditioned to deny my reality. I have been a truth teller, a truth seer, a truth speaker since I came out of the womb. I've been calling it as I see it and speaking truth to power since the 1980s. Okay? I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. And I remember I found it rather peculiar that the people who were supposed to protect me, my parents, wanted me to be quiet. That what happens in this house stays in this house. Wanted me to keep secrets that would make me sick. Wanted me to not say what I was seeing. Wanted me to be quiet about abuse and violence and addiction and chaos and dysfunction. I was the oldest sibling inside of our home, the eldest daughter. And when I was very young, I started to hear those messages. One of my very first memories was seeing my mother with a black eye. I wasn't even school-aged yet. And at the age of 4, I used to march around the home and tell my mom she should value her worth. No one taught me that. No one told me that. So how did I know that? How did I know to say that as a 4-year-old who had not been conditioned to know about worth? How did I know that? Because I was connected to the I am that I am within me. I was connected to that infinite primordial wisdom that lives within me. And so when I would say something, I was speaking like an elder as a little girl. And it was confusing for adults who were raised in paradigms that children are supposed to stay in their place and that they weren't supposed to speak, that they didn't know that children were the closest from heaven. We had just came from the heavenly realms, and they forgot. And so when my parents would have their disagreements, and sometimes it became violent, especially if my dad was under the influence of whatever substance he was numbing himself with, my little sisters got scared. And they would call on me, the eldest, to protect them and to make them feel safe. And when I could hear the fighting and the yelling and the screaming and the dysfunction happening, I was connected to that I am presence within me. That voice of God whispering to me guidance and direction of what to do. And there was one particular morning where I heard my mother screaming. My dad was being violent toward her. And my little sisters were screaming, asking me to go do something. And I think I probably was 7 or 8 at the time, telling me, little old me, go do something. And our bedrooms were upstairs in our childhood home. And so I'm creeping down the stairs and I'm sitting on the stairs and I'm listening. Just listening to see, can I hear what's happening? And as I'm listening, I can hear my mother's yells increasing in volume, and I could hear my dad's rage increasing in volume. And I run down the stairs and I creep around and I could see him straddled over her, strangling her. And I heard that voice inside that my grandmother taught me to listen to, my granny, that said if he doesn't stop, he will kill her. And so my wise self sneaks around them. And I go into the other room and I call 911. I didn't say anything. I just left the phone unhooked. And then I went into another room. We had 2 phones. Y'all remember back in the day when you had to have phones connected to a wall? Some of y'all in another generation where all we used to is this. I grew up where the phone was connected to the wall, okay? I went to another room and I unhooked the phone so they could hear what I was hearing. No one taught me how to do this. I'm listening to that voice of primordial infinite wisdom in my body temple to guide me. And I'm being guided by that voice as a little girl. Yes, house phones. And my dad, he saw me. He said, get the fuck out of here. And I run back upstairs. And my sisters are crying and screaming and asking me to do something. And I'm just sitting there listening. And I'm listening. I was like the protector of the home, even though I was a little girl. And it wasn't long before they stopped. My mom left. And soon there was a knock on the door. And my dad goes to the door. And I'm sitting on the stairs. And I'm listening. And as I'm sitting on the stairs listening, I hear the police share with my dad that they received a call that there was a disturbance in the neighborhood and asked, had they heard of anything? Asked my dad. And my dad said, no, I don't know. Maybe it was the neighbors. And I felt this holy fire brewing within me. And I went running down the stairs and I said, he's lying. He was just beating on my mom. And he beats on me too. And the police came and they separated us. And my dad's face looked like, oh shit. She did the thing we told her not to do. She said something. And the police took me into one room and my dad into another. And they started asking me questions about, well, what's happening in the home? And I told them. And they asked me, do you have anywhere to go? And I said, my granny. I want to go to my granny's house. I want to go to my granny's house. So they took me and my sisters to my granny's house. That same day, my mom came to my granny's house and got us. And at the time, we had moments in our childhood where we were having financial challenges and we didn't have a vehicle at this time. And so my mom walked to get us, and we had to walk all the way back home. And I remember walking back home, I asked my mom, is he there? And she got quiet. She didn't say anything. And I asked again, is he at home? And she told me to be quiet and that I should have never did what I did. And when we got home, that was when World War III started between my father and I. Because I've never been one to back down. I've never been one to acquiesce. I've never been one that you can silence me. I've never been one that you can lie to me and I'm not going to say something. I've never been one that you can beat me into silence. By the time I was 8, I experienced physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. And I've been speaking truth still. You can't take it from me. You can't beat it out of me. And so this truth teller has been within me my entire life. And as I have navigated this industry, hey there, Mary, it's good to see you as well. Thank you for your presence. As I have navigated this industry that I'm in, as I have navigated other industries I've been in, as I have navigated various encounters, that inner knowing within me has continued to bubble up and reveal the truth. Part of my spiritual gift is to be a sacred mirror, which means that I tend to mirror to people the shadow aspects of themselves that they have not faced and integrated. And they either get triggered and they project back, or they lie, or they gaslight, or they have the emotional intelligence and spiritual maturity to go be self-reflective and introspective and do their inner work. And that's what my containers are for the people who truly want to rise and evolve and ascend inside of their consciousness, inside of their embodiment, so that they can go do the things that God has called and created them to do. And as I have navigated different experiences, I have also experienced the consequences of not listening and trusting that inner knowing within that has been within me since I was a little one. And as I said before, there is a 100% misalignment the 1% woman experiences when you take that 1% misstep. That's all it takes for us. 1% misstep and you're out of alignment. Because God requires us to be in pristine alignment. God requires us to walk the narrow road. God requires us to walk the middle path. God requires us to walk the road less traveled, which means you can't be looking to the left and to the right and seeing what he, they, she, and everybody else is doing. You have to do what thus saith the Lord is calling you to do. And sometimes it's going to look radically different and significant compared to colleagues, compared to others, compared to your neighbor, compared to your peer, compared to your competitor. And that's why you have to trust yourself. And right now, God is calling us to be different. God is calling us to rise out of the superficiality that many people are acquiescing their power and their divine authority to these systemic powers. What are the systemic powers? The powers of capitalism. More people are concerned about playing the game of capitalism than they are about playing the game that Creator put on this planet to co-create heaven on earth in this lifetime for the good of all, not just for their bank accounts. And there are consequences when you don't listen to yourself. I experienced it. I found myself in that chasing, wanting more and more and more and more and more. Addicted to achievement. Addicted to milestone chasing, goal chasing. And I found myself inside of a container, 2022 and 2023, where there were big promises being made around how much money you could make. I bought into the shiny marketing, and I needed to learn those lessons. But what I saw in there was the psychological manipulation that was causing many to acquiesce their power, fawn, go into people-pleasing patterns, to lose themselves, to turn into replicas of each other, to sound like each other, to look like each other. And I started to name this because part of my calling and mission was being a trauma expert. My niche used to be self-love and narcissistic abuse recovery before I evolved into being a somatic identity architect and claiming who I've always been as a prophetess and a spiritual counselor. And so I was naming what I was seeing on my platforms. And I was punished for that. I was scapegoated for that. I was gaslit for that. I was disconnected from by colleagues and peers. Some who were just on here just check themselves out because they don't want to hear the truth. And when I was in that space, I was attracting white women who were masking niceness and performing allyship, who merely came into my space to extract and take and colonize my work and pillage from my clients. They were poaching my clients and my vendors. In fact, one of them, their dad married my vendor. I have stories for days about the foolery that I've experienced. I had to experience the consequences of not trusting my inner knowing. And what that did was it took me off my path for a season. And leading in the way God called me to lead. And there was a consequence to that. I faced consequences for that. Spiritual consequences and consequences in the physical realm. But when I returned to myself, and I returned to who I know myself to be, and I returned to the Almighty I am that I am, God started to eliminate the truth of why I was sent there. To see what happens behind the scenes, to see the truth, and then to speak to it. And you may be in a completely different industry. You may be in a completely different type of work. You may be in a different season of your professional leadership career. But you know what I'm speaking of when you've had an idea in the workplace and a peer took credit for it or stole your idea. Or you brought something to the marketplace and someone copied it and stole it from you and claimed it as their own. Or you trusted someone to come inside of your space or your network or your community or to experience yourself, and they try to hijack your identity and who you be. And it's not a good feeling when you experience that. But I believe those are often the consequences of not listening to that inner knowing. And I believe partly why you don't listen to that inner knowing is because you don't know the difference between hypervigilance and holy vigilance. Hypervigilance is when you are bracing, scanning for threat, looking for safety. You don't feel safe in your own body temple. You are in an active trauma response. And because of this, you are using a different part of your brain and your consciousness to observe your physical reality. And sometimes you're not perceiving through the lens of truth, you're perceiving through the lens of trauma. However, when you are in holy vigilance, and this is part of my teachings that I share in my work, and so if you hear this and it resonates, then be with it. Don't go and take it, be with it, integrate it, or reach out and work with me, and I can support you with that. Holy vigilance is where you feel safe in your body temple. You're regulated. You're not bracing. You're not scanning for threat. You're not looking for danger. You're operating from spiritual discernment, where you're able to discern and perceive through the lens of truth, and then trust what Creator is revealing to you, and then go into the next step that Creator is calling you into as a result of that information that you're receiving. I call that supernatural intel that Creator is giving you the grace to receive, because not everyone gets access to that level of intel. However, when you're operating from hypervigilance, you may gaslight yourself because that's what you've been programmed to do. What does self-gaslighting mean? You are second-guessing yourself. You're doubting your own reality. You're not believing those little, subtle, small, little, something seems off about this person. Something seems off about their behavior. Something seems off about what they're doing. Something seems off about the way they're doing it. I can't put my finger on it, but something is off. In that moment, when you gaslight yourself out of what you are discerning and you go into rumination, you're not trusting. And when you're not trusting, you're not being led from Creator. You're not being led to lead. You're not being led to create change. You're not being led to create impact on the planet. You're not being led to disrupt systems. You're not being led to transform industries. You're not being led to change status quo. You're stuck in your own dysregulation. You're not using your voice. You're not creating more visibility. You're not allowing yourself to be seen or heard or known. How much time is passing when you're in that state? And then the consequences that accumulate as a result, that stump your growth, that stump your evolution, that stunt your impact, that stunt the legacy that you were put on this planet to create, that is supposed to outlive you. And so inside of my work in 2023, I released a container called Uncensored: Reclaim Your Voice and Speak Your Raw, Naked Truth. And I have been sitting with releasing the Uncensored 2.0 version of this because I have been discerning that there are women leaders of faith who are supposed to be using your voice in a new way, not in the way that you've always been using it, not in the way that feels safe, but in the way that disrupts. And because somewhere inside of you, that little girl is trying to stay safe, she has put a filter over her ears and a veil over her eyes and a muzzle over her mouth so that she's not leading in the way she's being called by Creator to lead right now. Something I'm brilliant at, extremely gifted at, one of a kind at, one of the best in the world at, is soul work, is soul retrieval, is inner child healing, is identity work. One of the absolute best. I am phenomenal at this. And as a result of my work, people don't come into my spaces and get filled up on hype. I don't regurgitate something I heard somewhere else. What comes through me is a combination of my own embodiment, of my expertise, of over 2 decades of education and professional experience. It is pure power. And people permanently rewire the patterns that once kept them in different cycles of sabotage inside of their lives, inside their relations, inside of their leadership. And when you come into my space, we uproot that from the root. We rewire it on a root level, whether it's through your lived experience or your ancestral lineage, and transform you on a psychological, emotional, spiritual, energetic, emotional level, where you come out on the other side as your original divine design, operating in that supernatural power that you already had before the foundations of the world were laid and before you were in your mother's womb when Creator knew who you were. That is the level of power that I bring to this work. And if you know God is calling you for such a time as this to rise up even more in your leadership, in the industry you're in the field you're in in the organization you're in, then I have 2 ways you can step into my world. I'm going to bring Uncensored 2.0 back. Simply DM me, Uncensored. I'll share more details about that. I don't have a sales page or anything yet. I'll get that organized. Or you can apply to have a space inside of the Supernatural Woman Inner Circle. This is a 6-month identity upgrade where you come to hear the voice of God again and elevate in your leadership, elevate in your womanhood, elevate in your love life, where you have the type of marriage that is so hot and healthy where your marriage becomes the blueprint and the example in your inner circles. This is the space where you are she who not only has it all, but you don't have to hold it all alone in my world. And so you can reach out to apply for a spot there. And if you heard something that I shared inside of this conversation, and you know a fellow powerful, overachieving woman that needed to hear this and needed to be reminded of, it's not over yet. We still got work to do. We're just getting started. Then please share this with them. I'm looking forward to our next conversation, and I will chat with you very soon. Take care now, powerful soul.